So now we're beginning Willa Cather, one of ours. Actually, we're taking a step back chronologically, but we've been going backwards ever since the beginning of the class. Chronology doesn't matter to me. What these novels say and what they stand for matter, and that's what we're trying to get a hold of. Our goal for today is to put Cather into a broader context, and then to get into some of the character development in one of ours. And I wanted to begin today with a couple of pensées from Pascal. And this is just to reorient ourselves to what we're trying to accomplish in class. And Pascal is one of the great philosophers of the 1600s who wrote this collection of thoughts. And he has some thoughts on misery, which are wonderful for today. Here's one of the things he says about misery. The only thing that consoles us in our misery is distraction. And yet, this distraction is the greatest of our misfortunes. For it is distraction that chiefly hinders us from thinking about ourselves and imperceptibly brings about our ruin. Without distraction, we should be in a state of boredom, which would drive us to seek surer means of escaping from boredom. But distraction diverts us and leads us, all unwittingly, to death. So what should we do when we're thinking about ourselves? This is also from his collection on misery. When I consider, Pascal writes, the short duration of my life, swallowed up in eternity that stretches behind and before, and the little space which I fill and even see, engulfed in the immensity of spaces I know not and which know not me, I am frightened and astonished at being here rather than there. For there is no reason why here rather than there, why now rather than then. Who has set me down here? By whose order and direction have this place and time been allotted to me? So let's just take these as our core text for the beginning of class today, these thoughts from Pascal, which can be summarized basically like this. When man is thinking about his state, he's miserable because he realizes the insignificance or the indeterminateness of his life. So man comes up with ways of not thinking about his fate. And those ways of not thinking about his fate are what Pascal calls distraction. Distraction prevents us from thinking because thinking itself is painful and the conclusions from thinking are painful. But the failure to think about your fate renders you less than human, leads you to death, the death of that which is distinctively you. So human beings are inescapably miserable. And the only people who aren't miserable are those who don't think. Now, while I'm not saying that Hemingway, and I'm not saying that Tom Wolfe, and I'm not saying that Willa Cather are Pascalians, there is a certain sense in which serious people think the modern world is pure distraction. That is, modern people, the saying goes, or the mode of thinking goes, are shallower than people from previous epochs of human history, and they're willing to live their lives in a distracted state without contemplating their own souls and their own fate. fleeing from distraction to distraction. Modern people are never introspective. They never consider their soul. And it's a chief tenet of social science that with modernization comes secularization. That is, as peoples become more modern, as they adopt the advances of the modern world, they become more secular. That is, less willing to live their lives according to faith. Modernity means science. And what we could see, perhaps, if we take that finding to be serious and take it to be gospel truth, if I can use that term, if we take that saying to be true, we might say, look, what modernization means is a move away from an institution that forces us to think about our fate and our soul. Modernization means not only secularization, but making people shallower. Human beings want something. They want something. They want happiness. And the modern world delivers distraction, which is often confused with happiness. And now, while it's an overstatement, and I recognize it as an overstatement, I'm going to make an overstatement, which is much of the greatest modern literature is a critique of the modern world. A belief that man can simply not be at home. A man cannot be happy in the modern world. This is true of novels written from the left and novels written from the right. I take Hemingway's novel to be written from the left, and I take Cather's novel, in a sense, to be written from the right, although I think she transcends, and I think he, in a way, transcends that divide. So when we're looking at these novels, we're looking at what these particular authors think is missing in America. We're looking at what these particular authors believe is missing in the modern world. We probably can construct from their idea of what is missing a more positive vision of what a full and happy human life would be. Perhaps we can't do that in the case of Hemingway. That is, the life that would be happy for Hemingway isn't human, but that's another matter. But I think we can do that for both Woolf and Cather, and we'll be able to see for the other authors that we look at. These guys are doctors, and they're telling us about our civilization's sickness. And hence, pointing to what health would look like. And that, I believe, is what Willa Cather is up to, not only in this book, but in all her books. Get to that in a second. So that's just a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing, why we're reading novels. These novelists are thinkers. They are not simply painting pretty pictures, although I think Cather writes with unparalleled beauty. But she's not simply about painting a picture. She is about painting a picture and moving you to understand yourself and your political community better, which is, I think, why she is still worth reading. Beauty's enough, but she's more than that. So one of ours is the novel that we're turning to. And like The Sun Also Rises, one of ours takes place against the backdrop of World War I. The Sun Also Rises shows World War I brings reality, the reality of war and death to all. And those who are brave enough to see it, those who are manly enough to see it, those like Jake Barnes, can virtuously choose to live a life in the face of that death and that meaninglessness. I would hate to say that Jake really lives, but he's willing to search for a way to lose himself in nature at least, either fishing or swimming, as we see in the book. Human relations for Jake do not prove satisfying. And as I mentioned near the end of last class, it is not clear to me that for Hemingway, World War I causes the problem, though it does cause Jake's impotence. I believe that for Hemingway, World War I reveals the unpleasant truth about human life, the truth of alienation, the reality of alienation. Now, all of the action in Sun Also Rises takes place after the war. And therefore, I think it is not a leap to say that the book, The Sun Also Rises, is interested in the consequences of the war. It's interested in the consequences of the war. The great unanswered question of the novel, whether Jake and Brett could have been happy together, is a question precisely because the war has happened. It's a question precisely about the consequences of the war. One of ours is different than The Sun Also Rises in this respect. One of ours takes place before, during, and after the war. Though I think it's safe to say, I didn't do a word count on this, that it's mostly before the war. It is a book in 5 parts, much like a Shakespearean tragedy. Part 1 is called On Lovely Creek. Does that sound nice? And it deals with Claude Wheeler's life in Nebraska and his discontent with American society. If I had to summarize it like the topic in a sentence, that would be it. Part 2 is entitled A Need, if that's how you say the name. I've never said it out loud before. And it deals with Claude's effort to find happiness in marriage. Part 3, Sunrise on the Plains, or excuse me, on the Prairie, shows Claude miserable in his marriage and willing to join the Allied cause in World War I. So I think it's safe to say the first 3 parts are set in Nebraska, before the war. Although the war has started, before America's entry in the war. Part 4, Voyage of Anchises, depicts the disease-infested journey of the Americans across the Atlantic as they are preparing to fight. And Part 5, Bidding the Eagles of the West Fly On, shows Claude fighting World War I. And spoiler alert, you guys want to hear?
No.
Okay. close your eyes. If you don't want to hear, close your eyes. Or if you don't want to see, close your eyes. I'm just going to give a little hand signal. Close your eyes if you don't want to know how it ends. Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3, close. Okay, back. My point in mentioning this, so I mean the first point of contrast between these novels, Sun Also Rises is all afterward. Willa Cather's novel is before, during, and after, although the after is about 2 pages in the book, although I think it's the most important 2 pages of the book. My point in mentioning all this is Cather is a more fundamental writer than Hemingway, or that this book is a more fundamental book than The Sun Also Rises. Because this book, one of ours, raises the important question, why was there a war? What was wrong with Western civilization that brought us to the edge of our own destruction in the senseless violence of trench warfare? She shows the war unfold. She shows the war draw people in. She shows the war destroying people, though maybe not Claude. She raises the question, why would people join such an effort? Why did the cause seem to be worth the sacrifice? Hemingway is all after the war. She's as much before as after. Hence, she allows us to think about a wider range of questions that are more fundamental than Hemingway allows us to think about. Think of it like this. I mean, I'm willing to say many things about Willa Cather. One of ours won the Pulitzer Prize in 1922. That's this book. The Sun Also Rises was written in 1926. Still, even though Cather wrote very close to the war, she saw the war in a broader perspective. What is more, Hemingway should have had a better perspective than Cather, right? He had, after all, joined the war effort himself. And you might have thought about why he had joined the war effort. I suppose that his view on this is simply that the war did not change things. It did reveal things, but it did not change things. But Cather thinks that the war revealed a sickness that was there before, and it is her task in one of ours and in her other books to depict that sickness unfolding in time. It'll be our job, at least one of our jobs as we look at this book, to discover what that sickness is. So whenever anyone tries to reduce an author to his personal experience, that shows the limits of you as a reader or of that author. Cather raises more questions that Hemingway was better situated to answer, which is kind of a tribute to her as a thinker and as a novelist. And is kind of a reproach to Hemingway as a thinker and as a novelist. These are the reasons why I think, or these are some of the reasons why I think, we can say that she's a more fundamental writer than Hemingway. Hemingway may be more widely known, but the world is not just. And that would be like a piece of evidence number 1. So while you may be sitting back and saying Yenor's kind of a Cather fanatic, that would be correct. I've read everything she's ever written, except her letters. And her letters were sealed upon her death, and were not to be read by anyone except a select group of people until 2014, And that's coming up soon. So like little rodents or spiders, I will soon be crawling amidst her letters. But I do have the calendar of her letters, summaries of each letter she wrote. I've read that. I actually highlighted that. But I think of my affinity or fanaticism here in favor of Cather as a conclusion, not a premise, if you understand what I mean by that. I did not pick up Cather and instantly salivate. I mean, I shouldn't say it like that. I did not salivate before I picked up Cather. It was only after I read her and began to enter into her life and her mind that I came to be a fanatic, that is, a fan of Cather. I think she is the most beautiful writer ever. You understand? Ever.
That's a long time.
And she's the deepest thinker of any American author. She ranks, in my view, with any of the writers that pass often for the greatest. We should not hold it against her that she's American. Right? Why should we hold it against her that she's American? Dostoevsky has nothing on Cather. I mean, Cather has nothing on Dostoevsky. Tolstoy, Jane Austen, hacks. No, I'm just kidding. Cather is in that category of thinker and writer. She writes beautifully. She writes deeply. And like I say, don't hold it against her that she's American. Just because she's ours doesn't mean she can't be great. She is a significant author. Every word in her book matters. There is no detail wasted in any of her books. This or any of her books. She's the cat's meow. You can test that proposition as you read the book. Okay, I've read the book 8 times. I still bawl at the end, but I'm, once again, emotional. And that's not the only book that I would say that about her. I know how it ends, too, so I can look that in the face. And nevertheless, okay. Let's begin today by looking at part 1, On Lovely Creek. It's always true of Cather that she develops her characters slowly and with great detail. Everything that she writes about every character is significant. I can squeeze the life out of any novel, but it's important to catch the beauty of it and the depth of it. So each thing she writes is significant, and it's your quest as a reader to figure out what the significance of each word is. But never lose sight of the big picture in Cather. And we see that part 1 focuses on the Wheeler family. And the Wheeler family consists of 5 people: Nat Wheeler, Evangeline Wheeler, Claude Wheeler, Bayless Wheeler, and Ralph Wheeler. And Claude is the protagonist of the novel. He is one of ours. So I think it's important that we together here as a class attempt to paint a picture of Claude. So let's hear, what do we have to say about Claude Wheeler? Yes, Miss.
It seems like he's insecure about what other people think about him.
All right, he's worried about public opinion. What else can we say about Claude?
He has a deep distrust in like Christianity and priests.
Well, he doesn't talk about priests, right? Does he?
He talks about ministers.
Pastors.
Seems skeptical of Christianity. We want to pursue this. What else can we say about Claude? Mr. Winkleman?
Well, I think he feels oppressed by the heavy hand of his father.
I'm going to say oppressed and restless. What else can we say about Claude? Go ahead.
I would say he's overly sensitive.
Explain what you mean by that.
Very, very concerned with outward appearances, with himself, with what other people are going to think of him. His father's joking, his father's attitude towards him.
Okay, so let's call that he's a lover of propriety. He wants to be proper. He wants to do things the right way. He washes his car before he goes to the circus. Right? He's worried about the swear words or cuss words his dad uses in telling stories. Right? He almost already understands the difference between being praised and being praiseworthy. His dad is admired, but is not entirely admirable. Right? He wants to make sure the farm runs the right way. So I like that. He loves what's excellent. We could almost say he loves what's beautiful. But he's not really satisfied with having found it yet. That's good. What else can we say about Claude?
Pig.
He's a pig? What do you
No,
mean?
he's big.
Oh, he's big. All right. I didn't think he was a pig. Yeah.
No, he's not.
All right.
And he's redheaded.
He is what we call an oaf. Just kidding. I'm not sure if that's true. In the Midwest, we call them oafs. Big, redheaded. But he's not dumb. That's the difference, I suppose, between an oaf and he. What else can we say? Go ahead.
He's concerned that Ralph is trying too hard to make Malis and his mother change. He seems to be defending, not really traditionalism in general, but at least at that moment in time, defending his their right to be traditional.
His mom is a traditionalist, right? She doesn't like change. Does Claude like change?
Yes, if it's for the better.
What changes he doesn't really embrace many changes, right? He's not like Ralph. Right? Ralph is the extreme trinket embracing Wheeler. Right, we can even look at their names. We find out all about their names, don't we? What is Wheeler? What's the wheel?
Rolls along.
It's a great piece of technology, right? Right? The Wheeler is you live in a technological culture. We're going to name them the Wheelers.
Claude hates
Okay?
his name.
What's that?
Claude hates his name.
He doesn't like his name, correct. There's a confusion in his name. We're going to get to that. Ralph Wheeler.
Throwing up.
Throwing up on the tire. No, Ralph is your typical American. Ralph is a good American name with the good American spelling, not Ralph, which is what it should be. Right, he's an American. That is, he goes whole hog into American opinion. He embraces the technological culture, is always messing with trinkets. He eventually, as we see in the book, trades up from his father's plantation to his own in Colorado. He is upwardly mobile and into the improvements in everyday life that can be accomplished. What is the basement filled with?
Old trinkets.
Old things that he has bought that have no longer worked or have been superseded by subsequent inventions. Like, I'm kind of one of these guys, like, I like grapefruit, but I'm happy with the grapefruit spoon. Just dig out the grapefruit and eat that. Then there are those who like the little glass thing that you can put the grapefruit on, cut it in half, and then you just turn it, and then you get a little bowl full of juice. You guys ever seen that? That's the next one. And then there's an electric version of that. And now, no doubt, there's some sort of computerized grapefruit squeezer that you just stick the grapefruit in and out comes perfect grapefruit juice.
Or you buy the grapefruit juice at the store.
Or you buy it at the store. Yeah, you need a refrigerator and all that stuff for that. Ralph's basement is filled with old grapefruit things. Spoons and, he's got the latest invention. Not grapefruit, but this kind of thing. So Ralph is the ultimate American of the family, right? Bayless.
Ugly person.
Think about what that name means. Bayless. What's a bay?
Body of water.
A body of water that's open to the outside world, right? He's without that. Bayless. Right? He is a closed world. When he looks at a beautiful house later on in part 1, the oldest house in town, that all the girls woo over, what does he want to do? Pull down that old trap and put up something modern. But all of that without any of the charm and spunk and liberality of Ralph. He's closed-minded and technological. Claude Wheeler. He thinks of Claude meaning, why does he not like his name?
Chunk name.
What's that?
A chunk name.
What does that mean?
Like it's like Roy or just like this hillbilly kind of name. Like that tries to make it sound like regal in a way.
Okay. Chunk name.
She says it in the book.
Yes. Those are her words? Chunk?
Well, yeah, it might have been
Chunk. Maybe that's what I just missed. I'm getting old. My ears aren't. I thought you. Well, that's good, right? He is also worried about it being pronounced Claude by Enid later on in the book. But what country? Claude.
French.
It's French, right? There's a certain confusion here in his name. Because as we're going to see in Cather, French means old, means tradition. Wheeler means new, technological. So there's a confusion, a split in Claude's name that reflects his inability to find a home in the world. Evangeline Wheeler.
Timid.
What does Evangeline mean?
Kind
Good
of
for
Christian, like it sounds religious in itself.
It does kind of sound religious, right? People are often known as evangelists, people that spread the gospel. Right? So she's Christian and technological. Or she's a Christian forced to live in a technological culture. Is she a Christian in the book? Very devout, right? Is she very technological? She doesn't understand all that complicated stuff. Ralph, can you figure this out for me? How do you work the remote control?
I missed that part.
No, the remote control's not in there. I look at these books as timeless works. So like Hemingway talks about drinks, and I think you can insert video games and write the same book. And Nat Wheeler. I'm not willing to put too much significance on the name Nat, but he is the patriarch of the family, right? He is like when he came to Nebraska, it was nothing. And now he looks at all of the plains spotted with wonderful plantations, growing wheat and corn and raising cattle and little towns springing up. And he feels and acts as if he is a kind of founder of that land. Right? He's the man behind the curtain. And for those of you who have read Willa Cather's novels, this is the role played by Alexandra I can't remember, Alexandra, I will say, from O Pioneers. She makes this plains into a place where human beings can live. This is what Nat Wheeler seems to be in this book, a founder. But now the work of founding is done, and he's left with making fun of people. Right? I mean, we never see what Romulus did after he found Rome, although he lived several years afterwards. This is what Nat Wheeler is.
Except he's still going around helping people and making loans and seeing how
He's
they're doing.
looking after his flock.
And he's doing-
These are just some of the Wheeler. These are the Wheelers. These are just some of the characters. As I say, though, their names are significant. Just like in Tom Wolfe, right? Tom Wolfe picks his names out carefully. Roger White II, Roger II White. That matters. Miss Connery?
What is significant about Nat, though?
I can't think of anything that's
Because
significant
I
about
think-
Nat.
Like, I think of, like, gnats, like,
Yeah, but his name is Nathaniel.
oh, okay.
So, and Nat is not short for Nathaniel.
It's just,
Yeah, but he's not, yeah, I mean, he's not that, though. All right. I mean, it's safe to say, I think that Nat is kind of in the family, but not of the family anymore. I mean, he looks at his family with a kind of ironical distance. A little bit like Mr. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. Oh, I got all these crazy daughters. I'm going to go into my study. Right? And he only comes out when they end up getting